Let's talk about how we as sound engineers can help our musicians and worship leaders use their personal mixing systems to get the best possible mix for them. You see, not everyone here is going to know exactly what they need in their mixes. They're not going to know exactly how they should approach it. A lot of times I walk up to people's mixes after I let them mix for a little bit, and I'll see that they've got things cranked, dimed all the way to the top, and other things just completely way down. There's just no in between, and there's really no idea of like, okay, what is it you're actually trying to accomplish here? Because a lot of times people just go, well, I think I need more of this and less of that, and just call it a day. And they find themselves really struggling to hear things. So let's talk about it from two different perspectives. Let's talk about it from a musician standpoint and someone who's a singer. So musicians, first, I usually recommend this. I usually recommend, if you're a musician, you have your instrument first in your mix. So have everything else down, have your volume on your headphone system at a decent level. I usually recommend just going right for noon at 50% and starting there, and then get your level set for your instrument to where it needs to be so you can hear it clearly. Don't worry about anything else until you hear yourself clearly first. Then start adding in other elements that you want to hear. So if you are a drummer and you want to hear the bass player, add the bass player in. If you want to have a little bit of keys and acoustics so you can hear the melody stuff, bring those in. If you have the option to pan things, pan those out a little bit away, because things that are down the center in that middle, those are going to be the ones that you're going to hear most defined. But if you pull them out to the sides, then they can be kind of in their own little space where you can hear them if you're kind of listening for them, but they don't have to be, they're not front and center. They're more off to the side. So they're going to be there. You're going to feel the fullness of it. You'll hear them, but they're not going to be the main focus. And then usually if you're a musician, you're going to have singers, right? So you want to hear them. So you turn those up to a level, pan them out to where they need to be, where if you have multiple worship leaders who each will sing their own song, you can either put them in the center or you can pan them out depending on where they're on the stage visually to you. It's kind of up to you at that point what you like. I personally try to keep most music or singers up in the center for me, so that way I can hear them clearly. They're right up front, and I know when I'm listening that whoever's voice I hear in the center, if they're a leader, they're going to be where I need to hear them and focus on. Versus if they're just a background vocalist, they're not going to lead a moment. I'll throw them off to the side where they're kind of acting more as another instrument, another layer. And then lastly, if you're running click and tracks, make sure those are at a decent level too on top of all this, so that way you can hear those things. But I tend to recommend that click becomes something that you feel more than you hear, because the last thing I want as a musician is to hear this nagging click that's just pounding my head. I want it to be something that more is like, it becomes part of the sound, if you will. So I hear it loud enough when the song first starts, but by the time we're in the big chorus, it's just kind of sitting with us and underneath it, and it only peaks out if we start getting off tempo. That's usually my approach to how I like to find my click level, being, in the middle of things. I want it to be loud enough that I hear it when I need to, but that way it kind of tucks itself back as long as we're all playing together. The drums usually kind of cover it up almost, because the drums, the kick and the snare will usually kind of slap over top of it. But if we start getting off time, we'll start hearing that click come in, because it'll be like kind of off time with everything. And so we'll be able to go, okay, we're getting off, and we can sync back up with it. Now, if you're a singer, on the other hand, I recommend the same approach, except instead of it being music first, is your voice first. However, there's one little thing I do recommend. Turn yourself up to that level that feels good and confident, and then turn it down just a little bit. And the reason is this, is that I find that singers tend to turn themselves up too much in their ears because they like to hear themselves. It sounds really great. But then they don't output enough of their voice into the microphone and don't give a good, loud projecting performance. And therefore, that starts to throw with the gain at the board and everything. So what I recommend is this: before you even put your ears in to check, do your sound check with your front of house person with your ears out, and give them that vocal performance. So you have nothing restraining you from hearing what you need to hear of your voice directly as it sounds to you, and give them that full voice as much as you can. Then once they've said, okay, good, I got your gain structure, then put your ears in, set it to where it sounds good in your headphones, and then back it off like 1 or 2 steps. That way you continue to project at that volume level that you need to for your engineer to have, and also you're not going to start backing your voice off because you feel like you're too loud. Because that's the thing, is that you crank your voice up too much in your ears, you can tend to psych yourself out and feel like you're singing too much and too loud, especially during quiet moments, because you're going to really hear yourself because it's amplified, right? You're not used to hearing your voice perfectly whispering in your ear when you're singing quietly. It's not normal for that. So by turning it down, you have less of a chance of accidentally over or undercompensating for yourself. So when it comes to mixing ears, that's kind of my main thing, is this. Focus on yourself first, then add elements in of other musicians and vocalists that you need to hear to support you. And if there's things that you don't really need, don't put them in your mix. If you don't need it, don't put it in there. But if you like me and you like to hear a little bit of everything, don't make everything the same level. Vary it across like you would be mixing. Vary it in a way that you hear things when they need to be heard, but not necessarily that they're all poking out at once. Not everything needs to be at the same level. And panning is your friend. If you have the ability to pan things between your left and right ear, use that. Spread things out. You've got this whole stereo field to work with. Don't just put everything up in the middle, and do your best to avoid this whole thing of putting only certain things in one ear and certain things in the other ear. That's going to really throw your brain off, because your brain doesn't work like that. It's used to hearing things in stereo together. It's used to hearing things come. If it's on this side of the room, your right ear still hears it. So don't put a click track in just your left ear. Put it in both ears. If your left ear comes out, you lose click all of a sudden. Put it in both ears, turn it down. That's all it needs to be. Lastly, if you've got the ability to add ambience or crowd mics into your mix, this is one that you need to be careful with, because it can be really easy to add too much or have not enough. If you're a musician, I recommend not having a ton of this in your ears, because really the only benefit you're going to get of this is having a little bit of that natural spaceness to things, which is good. But if you've got reverbs and such from your board coming into your ears, you can add those in, and that'll usually do just enough. But if you're someone like me who likes to hear what's happening in the room, having a little bit in there just to hear what's happening, the audience response, that really helps me feel confident, and that helps me feel like I'm in the space and not just playing to a CD that's super stagnant. The other thing too is, if you're a worship leader or a vocalist, be careful with those room mics, because a little bit too much and you're going to start hearing your voice sound even bigger than what it really is, because you're going to hear it coming through that PA into those mics. Just be careful with that one. I do recommend that if you have anything as a vocalist, if there's anything that you have always available to you as much as possible on your mixer where you can grab it and turn it down or up, it would be that microphone right there.